Okay, stop what you're doing for a second. Seriously. Take a look at the date on your phone.
Right.
It is Sunday, March 1st, 2026. And if you haven't checked the news since yesterday or, if you've just been skimming the headlines, you are waking up to a completely different world today.
You really are. It's one of those seismic shifts.
Because yesterday, February 28th, something happened that historians are going to be writing about for the next century.
We aren't just talking about a political resignation here or a minor scandal. We are talking about the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran for nearly 4 decades. Gone, just like that, in a single afternoon.
It's massive. And the immediate aftermath is, well, it's visible everywhere right now. We are seeing reports of smoke rising over Tehran. Oil prices are going absolutely vertical on Wall Street. And this is the big one. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed.
Completely shut down.
But before we get into the how and the who of all this, I think we need to just pause on the why you should care part. Because for a listener sitting in Chicago or Austin or London, Tehran can feel, a world away.
It feels far away until you go to the gas station or until you check your 401k on Monday morning. Look, this isn't just regional news. When the Strait of Hormuz closes, you're talking about blocking the transit route for 20% of the entire world's oil.
20%.
Yeah, 1/5 of global supply. That hits the price of gas at the pump almost immediately. And that's just the economic.
Which is terrifying enough on its own.
Exactly. But from a geopolitical standpoint, we have thousands of U.S. troops stationed in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain. They're all currently sitting in the crosshairs of a potential massive retaliation. The risk of a broader conflict right now is higher than it has been in decades.
So the mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We've got a huge stack of intelligence reports, geopolitical analysis, and breaking news sources here.
A lot of material to go through.
A lot. And we need to unpack exactly what went down yesterday, how this quote-unquote perfect strike actually happened.
Right.
We need to look at the intelligence that led to it, the intense political pressure from allies like Saudi Arabia, and then, and this is the really heavy part, we have to look at the terrifying question of what happens next.
Because when you remove a guy who has been the absolute unquestioned authority for 37 years, you don't just leave an empty chair.
No.
You leave a vacuum. And vacuums in the Middle East tend to get filled with fire.
Exactly. So let's start with the event itself. This wasn't some covert operation with a poison pill or a quiet drone strike out in the desert.
Not even close.
This was loud.
Very loud. It was a brazen daylight joint U.S.-Israel airstrike right in the heart of Tehran. We're talking about 30 bombs dropped directly on the Supreme Leader's compound.
New bombs.
Yeah. It was designed to be unmistakable. They wanted everyone to know exactly what happened and who did it.
Which is wild because, based on the reports we have here, Khamenei hasn't exactly been walking around in public lately. I remember reading about the insane security protocols they put in place last year.
Right. Context is really key here. You have to remember the 12-day war back in June 2025.
Yeah, that brief but intense flare-up.
Exactly. Ever since that conflict, Khamenei had been living in an incredibly deep bunker. Intelligence sources describe it as a hardened facility that was accessible only by an elevator ride that takes 5 full minutes to reach the bottom.
5 minutes in an elevator going straight down.
Straight down.
Yeah.
That is how deeply he was buried. For all intents and purposes, he was untouchable.
So they didn't bust the bunker. I mean, I know the U.S. has bunker buster munitions, but a 5-minute descent sounds like it's too deep even for those.
It is. They didn't go down to get him. They waited for him to come up.
Wow.
Look, intelligence isn't just about raw firepower. It's about immense patience. The CIA and Israeli intelligence had been tracking his quote-unquote pattern of life for months, just watching and waiting.
Waiting for a mistake.
Or a necessity. And they finally identified a rare window, a golden moment, where he actually left that deep bunker to attend an in-person meeting up in the surface-level complex.
And this wasn't just a casual tea break either. He was meeting with some absolute heavy hitters.
The heaviest. He was meeting with the commander of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the Iranian Minister of Defense.
They were all there in one room.
All in one room.
So this wasn't just an assassination. This was a complete decapitation of the entire military leadership structure in one fell swoop.
Precisely. It happened at 8:10 a.m. local time. The strike didn't just take out the supreme leader. It took out the exact people who would theoretically command the retaliation.
Cutting the head off the snake.
Exactly. It was a tactical move designed to induce total paralysis in the Iranian chain of command.
And looking at the geopolitical background in our sources, we know there was intense political pressure behind this strike, too. It didn't happen in a vacuum. There's a lot of reporting about the role of Saudi Arabia here.
That's a really crucial piece of the puzzle. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, has reportedly been urging President Trump to act for a while now.
And just to be clear for the listeners, our goal here isn't to take a political side on these decisions. We are just reporting what the diplomatic cables and sources are showing us.
Right, absolutely. We're looking at the grand strategy. And the strategic argument from Riyadh has been that a non-nuclear Iran was becoming too dangerous to leave unchecked.
Because they were getting close to the threshold.
Exactly. MBS's fear was that if the U.S. waited any longer, Iran would eventually cross that nuclear threshold. And once they have a bomb, they become untouchable forever. You can't do a regime change on a nuclear power without risking the end of the world.
So it was a now or never calculus. And President Trump didn't hesitate to own the strike. I saw his post on Truth Social yesterday.
He was very direct about it.
Yeah, he called it justice for the Iranian people. And he framed it explicitly as a move toward regime change, which is a really bold claim to make publicly.
Extremely bold. Because saying regime change implies that you have functional plan for what comes after the regime falls.
Right.
And to understand why that is so complicated, we have to look at how power actually works in Iran. Because it's not like Western democracies at all.
Yeah, let's really get into the weeds on this.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a huge misconception here among Western audiences. People see the title President of Iran in the news, currently, Masoud Pezeshkian, and they assume, well, the supreme leader is dead, but the president is still alive, so the government still functions.
That is the most common misunderstanding by far.
But looking at the organizational charts from our sources, that's not really how it works, is it?
Not even a little bit. In the U.S., if the president dies, the vice president steps in, the executive branch keeps running, the military still has a commander-in-chief. But in Iran, the president is not the commander-in-chief.
So what is he?
Think of the Iranian president more like a city manager. Or chief operating officer.
A manager. That sounds like a massive demotion of the title.
It's an accurate description of the power dynamic. The president manages the roads, the public schools, the diplomatic protocols, the basic economy. He handles the day-to-day civilian bureaucracy. But he does not control the guns.
Okay.
He does not control the state media. He does not control the courts.
So the supreme leader wasn't just some spiritual figurehead giving sermons.
No, Khamenei was the absolute, unquestioned authority. He controlled the state television, he appointed the head of the judiciary, and most critically, he completely controlled the IRGC. And we really cannot overstate how important the IRGC is to the fabric of Iran.
I want to dig into the IRGC right now because I think most people just view them as, quote-unquote, the Iranian army, just soldiers in uniform. But reading through the backgrounder on their economic footprint in our sources, they seem more like a massive corporate conglomerate.
Conglomerate is the perfect word for it. The IRGC is an absolute empire. They don't just have tanks and ballistic missiles. They control billions and billions of dollars in domestic economic assets.
How does a military run an economy?
Through these entities called bonyads, they are technically charitable foundations, but practically they are tax-exempt holding companies that answer only to the military.
Right. I saw that term in the analysis. These bonyads control huge sectors of daily life, don't they?
Massive sectors. Construction, telecommunications, energy, major ports. Some intelligence estimates say the IRGC controls anywhere from 40 to 60% of the entire Iranian economy.
That is staggering.
They run the black markets, the smuggling routes, the official ports, and they answered only to Khamenei. So when that strike hit yesterday, the U.S. didn't just remove a head of state.
They removed the Keystone.
Exactly. They removed the singular pillar that connects the religious establishment, this massive military-industrial mafia, and the civilian political bureaucracy.
The Keystone effect. You pull out that one central stone at the top of the arch, and the whole structure doesn't just wobble, it collapses.
It shatters. And we are already seeing that collapse manifest as total chaos on the ground.
We really are. The immediate fallout internally has been completely split, to say the least. And again, just reporting what the ground sources are showing, the images coming out of Iran today are just wild.
It's a very fractured picture.
On one hand, you have reports of outright dancing in the streets of Tehran, people toppling statues of the regime in places like Tehran. It really reminds me of the Masa Amini protests a few years back.
Yes, there is a massive segment of the Iranian population, especially the youth, who have literally been waiting their entire lives for this moment. They see this airstrike as the end of a brutal dictatorship.
A liberation.
Exactly. But you cannot ignore the other side of the screen because there are also thousands and thousands gathering at mosques right now, openly mourning, beating their chests, and screaming for blood.
The regime still has diehard supporters.
They do. And those supporters are heavily armed, deeply entrenched, and incredibly angry right now.
And that anger isn't staying inside Iran's borders. We mentioned the, quote, ring of fire earlier. Can you explain that concept for the listeners who might not be familiar with Iranian grand strategy?
The Ring of Fire is the geopolitical strategy Iran has been building for decades. It's the concept of surrounding Israel and U.S. interests with a geographic circle of heavily armed proxy groups.
Right, the militias.
Hezbollah up in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, various Shia militias in Syria and Iraq, the Houthis down in Yemen. Collectively, Tehran calls this the axis of resistance.
And now that axis is active, they aren't just waiting for orders.
The IRGC, or what's left of its decentralized command, is lashing out wildly. They have launched volleys of missiles targeting Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but they're also expanding the target list to hit soft economic targets.
Like what?
We're seeing breaking reports of attacks on luxury economic hubs in Dubai and the UAE. And more concerning for the U.S., they are firing at U.S. bases in Qatar, Kuwait, and Bahrain.
Which puts American lives directly at risk.
Exactly. The IRGC is trying to prove that even without Khamenei, they can ensure that absolutely no one in the region is safe.
And then there's the big one. The choke point we talked about at the top of the show, the Strait of Hormuz.
Iran has officially mined and closed it, and this is their ultimate asymmetric trump card.
Just so everyone understands the sheer stakes here, we mentioned the 20% of global oil figure. But practically speaking, for the listener buying groceries next week, if that strait stays closed for a week or two, what actually happens?
A global economic shockwave. Brent crude prices are already spiking today. If this lasts more than a few days, you are looking at U.S. inflation returning with an absolute vengeance.
Because transport costs go up.
Everything that moves by truck, cargo ship, or plane gets significantly more expensive to transport overnight. It disrupts supply chains for everything from consumer electronics to basic food staples. Closing the strait is basically an economic weapon of mass destruction.
Okay, so we have chaos in the streets of Tehran, ballistic missiles flying across the Middle East, and the global economy teetering on the edge of a massive inflation spike. The big question is who takes the wheel? Who actually becomes the next supreme leader?
Well, constitutionally speaking, there is a formal process. There's a body called the Assembly of Experts.
Right, I've seen them mentioned in the briefs.
It's a group of 88 senior clerics who are legally supposed to convene and vote for a successor. Right now, an interim council is technically running the show until they decide.
But 88 elderly clerics debating and voting sounds incredibly slow. And this situation on the ground is moving incredibly fast. Who are the actual front runners?
There are two main names floating around the intelligence circles right now. First, you have Mojtaba Khamenei. He's the son of the late supreme leader.
The son. Wait, but isn't Iran officially an Islamic republic? Hereditary rule seems like it goes against the entire vibe of the 1979 revolution.
It absolutely contradicts the original revolutionary ideals. The entire point of the 1979 revolution was about overthrowing the Shah, a hereditary king. Establishing a new dynasty now looks deeply hypocritical to the public.
So why is he a frontrunner?
Because Mojtaba has deep, deep institutional ties to the IRGC. He has the guys with the guns on his side.
Got it. Force over ideology. And the other guy?
Alireza Arafi. He's a hardline cleric, an educator, a very traditional religious figure. He fits the theological mold of the supreme leader perfectly,
Right.
but he lacks that deep, entrenched military backing. And this is where the analysis gets really interesting. This is the real aha moment of this entire deep dive.
I'm listening.
The intelligence sources suggest a very real possibility that the era of the clerics might actually be over.
Wait, the Islamic Republic without the Islamic clerics actually in charge?
Think about the power dynamics we just discussed. The IRGC has become a massive economic and military empire over the last decade. They have the ballistic weapons, they have the billions in Bonyad money, and they run the intelligence network. So why on earth would these powerful, wealthy generals let a group of 88 elderly religious scholars tell them what to do anymore?
Especially when the one guy keeping them in line, Khamenei, is dead. So you're saying a coup is likely?
A silent coup. There is a very high probability that the IRGC will just sideline the clerics entirely. They might keep someone like Arafi around as a purely religious figurehead to maintain the illusion of the republic, but the real, tangible power would shift permanently to the generals.
We could be watching Iran transform in real time from a theocracy into a straight-up military dictatorship.
Precisely, and that leads us to the three strategic scenarios for the future that analysts are modeling right now. None of them are particularly comforting.
Let's run through them for the listeners. Scenario 1.
Scenario 1 is revolution and full-scale civil war. The regime is decapitated and confused. President Trump is actively on social media, encouraging the regular Iranian army to defect and stand with the protesting public.
Pushing for that regime change from the inside.
Right. If the security forces fracture, say the regular army turns its guns on the IRGC to protect the protesters, you get a profoundly bloody internal conflict.
Like what we saw in Syria.
Like Syria, yes. But in a country with 3 times the population of Syria, with vast, complicated mountainous geography, it would create a massive global refugee crisis and destabilize the entire region for decades.
A total humanitarian disaster. Okay, scenario 2.
This one is the geopolitical nightmare, the nuclear sprint.
Oh boy.
Imagine the IRGC successfully takes full control via that silent coup we talked about. They look at what just happened to Khamenei and they say to themselves, the only reason the Americans felt comfortable striking us is because we didn't have the bomb yet.
It's all about deterrence. They see a nuke as their only life insurance policy.
Exactly. So the military dictatorship decides their only survival strategy is to enrich weapons-grade uranium and build a nuclear weapon immediately. A full sprint to the finish line.
And if U.S. or Israeli intelligence picks up on that sprint,
they can't just sit back and watch it happen. It forces a preemptive total war scenario to stop them before they can assemble a warhead.
which brings us back to thousands of American troops in the crossfire.
Exactly.
Man. Okay, so scenario 3. Is there any good news in these briefs at all?
Scenario 3 is de-escalation. But I'll warn you, this is the extreme long shot.
How does that play out?
The civilian reformists, maybe led by President Pezeshkian, managed to wrestle some administrative control in the chaos. They open back channels to the West and say, look, the old hardline guard is gone. Let's make a grand bargain.
A deal.
We stop the proxy militias, we stop firing missiles, and in exchange, you lift the crippling economic sanctions and let us save our economy.
But given that IRGC missiles are literally already hitting Tel Aviv and Dubai as we speak.
Exactly. It's incredibly hard to shake hands when you're actively shooting at each other. Given the sheer amount of blood already spilled in just the last 24 hours, analysts view this scenario as highly, highly unlikely.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? We tend to think of quote-unquote regime change as this single triumphant moment of victory. The statue falls in the square, everyone cheers, the credits roll. But looking at these scenarios, this feels way more like the opening scene of a really dark movie.
It really reminds me of the capture of Saddam Hussein back in the day.
How so? Because that was framed as a massive win at the time.
It was a tactical success. We found him, we got him. But removing Saddam created a massive power vacuum in Iraq that eventually led to the rise of ISIS, years of horrific sectarian violence and regional chaos that we are literally still dealing with today.
So, by taking out Khamenei, we might have solved one immediate problem, but opened the door to 5 brand new, potentially worse ones.
That's the heavy question I think you, the listener, really need to sit with today. Toppling a dictator is technically difficult, sure. It takes great intelligence and firepower. But is the act of toppling them actually easier than managing the sheer chaos that inevitably follows?
Right. Did this brilliant airstrike cut off the head of the snake, or did it just smash a glass container full of vipers?
That is the exact geopolitical reality we are facing. We are in completely uncharted territory right now. The post-Khamenei era has officially begun, and absolutely nobody has a map.
That is a chilling thought to leave off on. Well, we're going to wrap up this deep dive here. Keep your eyes locked on the news coming out of the Gulf this week, and honestly, maybe you could just fill up your gas tank today, just in case.
Definitely keep an eye on the Strait of Hormuz.
Well,
that is the ultimate barometer for the global economy right now.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back to analyze the fallout as soon as we have more clarity on where this is all heading. Stay safe out there.